Welcome to Sex and the Solo Girl. Join your host, her inner circle, and expert guests weekly for chats about dating, secure attachment, the solo lifestyle, doing relationships differently, and of course, sex. And here's your host, Janice Formichella.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sex and the Solo Girl. I've been loving this so far. Today, we're doing a special topic, we're talking about confrontation. I don't know what I'm going to name it yet. Okay. And this is an important topic. I really wanted to use the new show to talk about healthy relationships and communication, amongst other things. And so this is a perfect topic to have one of the episodes be about. And this is a perfect guest. Hello, Christina Morelli. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Congrats on the new show, by the way. This is going to be amazing. I'm so excited. I can't wait to start diving into all these different episodes that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Me too. It feels good to be more expansive and to continue to support people after their breakups. Christina is doing a lot of cool things in her business, including supporting couples to work through disputes a little bit better. Yeah. Is that what you would say?
Yeah. So my main focus is around helping couples with communication issues and turning their conflict into connection, and seeing confrontation as an opportunity actually to get to know your partner and yourself better.
And why is this particular aspect of relationships so appealing to you? You love this.
Well, conflict is inherent to our relationships, and it is inevitably going to happen where you have disagreements or you're going to be triggered. And how do we handle it? Nobody has ever taught us how to resolve conflict, how to repair relationships. There's so many times that conflict happens, whether it's internal, conflict isn't always necessarily you and your partner fighting, verbally fighting. It can sometimes just be like an internal conflict you have about something that your partner did that upset you, but you're not saying something about it. So now you have this internal conflict that's going on. How do you handle it? How do you handle those triggers, and how can we use conflict to actually help heal our wounds?
And she's got a special offer for us today. So where can we find you, and tell us about the workbook that you have?
Thank you. Yeah, you can find me at ChristinaMorelliCoaching.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram as well, at Christina Morelli Coaching. And the workbook that I put together, it's actually an entire kit of printable and downloadable resources that help you get through conflict. It's called the Conflict Resolution and Repair Kit. It talks you through the different stages of conflict and how to essentially have healthy conflict that is productive and generative and actually strengthens your relationship.
I think some people might be confronted about confrontation. Mm-hmm. Why are people afraid of it?
Confrontation there's risk involved, right? There's a level of insecurity that sits with us whenever we have to confront something that's difficult, whether that's confronting something with ourselves or confronting something with our partner. When we confront something with ourselves, there are typically really challenging feelings and emotions that come up that we often do not want to face. And that could be grief, that could be sadness, that could be anger. And oftentimes it's because we don't necessarily understand it. We try to intellectualize it. We don't know how to process it. Okay. So dealing with these things that we're confronted with are really challenging. It's a whole other level when we're confronted with our partner. The risk there is we could lose our partnership. We could lose our partner. And I think that is where the fear of abandonment comes in potentially with, I'm afraid of conflict, or I'm afraid of confrontation, because if I bring up this specific topic, what does that say about me? Yeah. What does that say about my partner? How are they going to respond? It's the unpredictability of it. And oftentimes we don't say the thing that we need to say the most because we're afraid of what that person's going to think about us or what they may have to say about us. Does that change their view on us? Which then, does that impact our relationship, the core foundation of our relationship? So there's a lot that can go into why people are afraid of confrontation, because it can feel really threatening to people.
One thing that comes to mind is it would be really great if couples were in the habit of talking about how they will deal with confrontation at the beginning of the relationship. But I doubt that many couples are at all used to doing that, especially in the honeymoon phase. You would probably not even think to do that. And then when you have your first argument, perhaps is what would happen to a lot of couples. You could both be like, whoa, what did I get myself into? We are completely clashing as far as dealing with this goes. And that can be scary. I mean, this could be relationship ruining.
Exactly. One thing I tell my clients is don't learn how to fight while fighting. So have that conversation ahead of time. Ask your partner, even before you commit to being in a partnership, how do you handle conflict? When I was younger in my previous relationships, I used to say I won't commit to somebody until we fight at least 3 times.
Oh my goodness. All right.
But that's because I was like, okay, first fight, I learn how you fight. We talk about it. Do you receive feedback? The second fight, did you take that feedback? Did you change? Third fight, last chance. So this was old thinking. This isn't what I am suggesting anymore.
Yeah, because that could be way down the relationship. I've heard, which I don't know, some people agree and some people disagree, that the honeymoon period can last, between
3 to 6 months?
Yeah, 3 months. But some people say even some couples kind of stay in that area.
Upwards of a year.
For a year. And so, and not everyone is going to argue during that time. And so you could be really invested in a relationship and then find out that this is something you both really need to work on, or even that you're not willing to stay with this person.
Yeah. So it's not that I'm recommending it. I'm just saying that's something that I used to do because that made me feel safe and secure at the time. That's how I was establishing the boundaries. And it's very different now. The level of communication that I have with my current partner, we talked about that before we ever even committed with each other. It's like, how do you handle conflict? What is your preference? What do you need if you're feeling triggered? Things along those lines, which I know we're going to dive into a little bit more later in this episode.
We certainly are. So I thought we could kind of talk about both of our experiences with confrontation. I will say it's something I've gotten better at over time. My parents didn't fight in front of us. I think I can remember like one time that I heard them fighting. I can also recall kind of hearing some very snarky things that they would say to each other, and then the other person just kind of letting it go. So I was very unfamiliar with how to do this. I also grew up in a very authoritative community and household where, I was getting told off and punished all the time, but absolutely not any space to talk about my feelings or stand up for myself at all. And I've never been comfortable with it. I have gotten better. When I used to have confrontations with people, I used to be so uncomfortable with it that I'd even have like kind of this buzzy feeling like in my head, and my eyes would kind of twitch a little. I mean, it was very, very hard for me to be in the moment. And like I said, I have gotten better. And something that is interesting to me about myself is that over time, I've gotten so good at confrontations and tricky conversations with my partners. I am a pro. It's like, we need to sit down. We need to discuss this. We need to both take turns talking about how we're feeling. I plan it out ahead of time. But I have a really hard time doing it with my friends. And
Interesting.
I know. I don't quite know what it is about, and maybe being less invested or even knowing less how a friend is going to respond. So I feel like maybe I kind of pick my battles, so to speak. And if I find myself, repeatedly feeling like I might need to confront this person, I'm very laid back. And so I am willing to let some things go.
Yeah.
I don't know. But if I feel like it's coming up again and again, sometimes for me, it's kind of a sign that the friendship has run its course. I mean, that's just me. It's different for everyone. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. In my past couple of relationships, I've just been absolutely great at it. And I am, quite proud that I've turned this around.
Yeah, I wonder if it has to do with when we think of friendships, we don't really think about fighting with our friends.
Yeah.
Like that seems very like a foreign concept to me. I mean, I understand friends can fight or have disagreements, but usually friends are so supportive and like whatever you need, whatever you want. And it's not a really contentious, there's not many opportunities for it to get really contentious, especially because you're not living together. You're not trying to build a life together, right? Yeah. There's a lot more that goes into a romantic partnership than a friendship. So it doesn't surprise me at all that like having arguments with a friend is something that would be common. But something that, to that point, that I have realized about myself in the past years is when a friend, if something does happen where I'm feeling hurt or disappointed, usually I would just be like, I don't need to address it. It was a one-time thing. But I made it a point actually to start actually addressing them, because to me, that was a vulnerability exercise.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Did you feel like you were on a path to get better at these things, or did it kind of come inherently?
Like confrontation in general?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've never been afraid of confrontation.
Okay.
I'm not one who starts confrontation, but I don't feel overwhelmed or anything like that during confrontation. There were absolutely aspects of confrontation that I recognized about myself during my growth. And one of those was recognizing there were certain things I wasn't willing to say. If somebody started a confrontation, I wouldn't cower, I wouldn't avoid it. I would sit there and I would handle the situation, it felt like, in those moments. But when it came to me having to express things, there were certain things that I wasn't willing to express because of the things that I mentioned earlier, which was, is this going to open up a can of worms and cause more issues in my relationship? Yeah. Does this mean that I'm not who I say I am because I'm having a different view at this point, which then could alter how my partner views me? So there was a lot of denial that went into certain things. And that's also goes back into like your own internal conflict of being fully transparent and honest with yourself as you are ready, because sometimes you're just not ready. But yeah, confrontation and being able to fight clean and in healthy ways has been something that just feels really empowering to me, honestly. Yeah. Being able to handle an argument well and know that you both come out of the argument feeling like you won, feeling closer, feeling more connected, to me is incredibly empowering and an incredible skill for you to learn.
Agreed. I hope a lot of people take a lot of this to heart. And this is a good segue into what we wanted to talk about, which is, what is confrontation? You know, what are the differences between other types of disputes, so to speak? I mean, we're not talking about huge blow-ups necessarily. Mm-hmm. So what would you say is confrontation? And then what would be the difference between a healthy and unhealthy confrontation?
Confrontation is essentially when you are being confronted with something that is opposing to your view, your preference, your stance, your something, and it can cause tension. It is strongly aligned with, this could go one way or the other, mm-hmm. and it could turn out bad or it could turn out good. So confrontation is, you feel one way, I feel another, different opposing views, essentially. How do we close that gap and find a middle ground for the both of us to coexist in and really thrive in? And so how do we take these differences and come together during those differences? And to answer your question about healthy and unhealthy, healthy is understanding that we all live our own subjective reality.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm.
Based off of our life experiences. Although you and I are having the same shared experience right now, how you feel about how this podcast is going could be very different than how I feel about how this podcast is going. So that is often where people lose themselves in a fight, is feeling like we had the same experience, your version's not true. And then the other person's like, no, your version's not true. And that's not the case. You can have a shared experience, but still have a different perspective. And your own personal subjective experience is different from one another.
Well, and so a fight, how would you describe that? I personally think the difference between a confrontation or a tricky conversation and mm-hmm. a fight is each person wants to come out winning. in a fight, I feel.
Yeah.
And I also think that there's a level of when you want to come out on top, sometimes I feel that you could say things that are personal and insulting. I mean, probably most of the time in a fight, whereas in a confrontation or a tricky conversation, you are very open to hearing from the other person and coming to a resolution, not who wins.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. A fight is, really, the fight is, it could be violent, and I don't mean necessarily physically violent. It could be verbally violent. So to your point, a fight is, somebody has to win, and both of us can't win, right? One of us has to win, both of us can't win. So I'm going to do what I need to do in order to win. And that could look like calling names, saying really low blows, saying things that, exactly. All of those things. Where you're right about confrontation is like, we are coming to the table. We know, again, have opposing views, but we're attempting to reach a joint goal that we have mutually agreed upon.
Love it. You and I were speaking the other day about this notion that it's not healthy when couples don't fight, which is exactly what people say. In a healthy partnership, couples fight. And if they don't, that could be a problem. So first of all, what do you think is possibly faulty about that, including, and also your own experience that you told me on the phone the other day? And then when it comes to confrontation, I don't know, is there a healthy frequency that people would have tricky conversations?
Answer your first question. Do I think it's unhealthy if couples don't fight? It ultimately depends. They say conflict is inherent to relationships. I think disagreements are inherent to relationships. Disagreements do not necessarily mean conflict.
Oh, love it.
Okay. So disagreements are absolutely inherent to relationships. Now, if you do not fight or have conflict or have disagreements in your relationship, yes, something is wrong. You are not dating the same exact person who has the same exact beliefs, the same exact feelings, the same, like that. It's impossible that you will get through a relationship without any level of disagreement. Does it actually escalate to one of those levels? Then that is different. The reason what you were bringing up about what you and I talked about the other day was how I hear so often that if couples do not fight, that's not healthy. I literally do not fight with my partner. We've been together for years.
I love it.
We have never raised our voice at each other. We have never, now we have moments of contention and we have moments of disagreement, but it never escalates into something that would cause a further divide between us. Every time we talk about something that is uncomfortable for us to talk about, because I want to be heard, he wants to be heard, I want to be right, he wants to be right, we find a way to do it that is loving, and a way to do it that is loving and supportive for one another, where we both feel heard, we both feel seen, and we both feel understood. So that is my answer to your question of like, is it healthy? I think it's perfectly healthy to have some conflict in your relationship. In regards to the frequency, it ultimately depends. If you're fighting every single day, no. God, give yourselves a break.
Relationships take work, but I don't think relationships should be hard work all of the time. Yeah. Which I do hear a lot of people saying, and I think they should be joyful a lot of the time, if not most of the time.
I like to use the word effort more than work.
Okay, yeah.
Because relationships do require effort. You have to make a conscious effort to still care the same way that you did at the beginning, to make an effort on yourself and, take care of yourself visually, or maybe make an effort to be as affectionate towards your partner, to make an effort to fulfill their love language. Like it takes a conscious effort as time goes on, and those things are not happening naturally because you're in different stages of your relationship. You're in different places in your lives. Your priorities change. It does still take an effort to plan dates for your partner, to remember to buy them gifts because you're thinking of them. So that's what I mean by effort. But those all should be, like you said, a joyful experience. Now, relationships are not always going to be joyful, especially when you are in a very long-term relationship. you inevitably will come to a point where you're like, I don't even want to look at my partner right now. Like, I just need some space because I need to focus on myself, or I need to focus on my kids, or I need to focus on my career. And it's like, I just don't have the capacity. So this idea of being in a blissful relationship every single day is highly unrealistic. And not something that I would necessarily say you should aim for. But what you should aim for is to consciously choose to engage and interact with your partner every single day to the best of your ability, even if it's for 2 minutes, or maybe you have an hour or two to dedicate to your partner. But if every day you can say, like, for the next 2 to 5 minutes, I'm just going to be incredibly present with my partner and available and there with them, and I'm going to ask them to do the same. That is what keeps that connection so strong, regardless of what your relationship goes through.
I always say that couples should think each day about how they can make their partner happy. And then as far as that goes and the health of a relationship, and we've definitely touched on it, but I think there's a couple things that we haven't touched on. And I think that if anyone is in a relationship right now, it might be good to understand the entire scope of how this can really benefit you and your relationship long term. And if you're really in love with someone, it would behoove you to take this on and learn and get Christina's workbook. I don't think you always have to corral your partner into the personal development kick that you're on, but I would say it would be a sign of the potential health and long-term longevity of the relationship if your partner would take this on with you or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, because nobody wants to fight. Nobody wants to have uncomfortable tension in the household for days on end. So if there are ways for you to engage with each other that feels really good, that helps you get through confrontation a lot quicker, helps you process your feelings a lot quicker, that way you both get back to loving each other and living your best life. Whenever we have issues in a relationship, that usually deeply impacts all the other areas of our life, our work, our friendships, our ability to take care of ourselves. But when a relationship is really good, you know what else is really good? The rest of your life.
Yes, I can definitely relate to that. My marriage, especially the last couple of years of it, was highly contentious. We were really young. We were not at all committed to this. We grew apart horribly, and we had fights all the time, and stupid fights. My God, I cannot believe. Look, I was in my 20s, so give myself grace. And I will say, when we had fights that were that big and fights that would carry on for multiple days, I was in grad school at the time. I could not focus. I felt sick constantly. I would have a hard time eating. I was distracted. And I've had happy relationships. And yeah, you just want to skip down the street all the time.
Exactly. You're so confident. You feel secure. You're like, I could do anything. I know in my relationship, I just feel so incredibly empowered to live my life. And it's because things just feel so good. But to the point that you were making of, like, why is it so important? It's not just because it impacts all the other areas of your life, but it also helps you know yourself a lot better, much more deeply, and your partner. Anytime I say that there's conflict, that's an opportunity for you to get to know your partner better, because there's potentially an unmet need or want, or maybe there's something that is triggering them that has nothing to do with what you said, but a trigger is coming up, and that's an opportunity for healing, for you to provide healing or a space for them to heal in those moments. So conflict is actually a really good way to progress your relationship, to strengthen your connection, to deepen intimacy. It's so deeply vulnerable to be in an argument, because you tell people things, your partner things that, could be used against you. Do they use it against you? Like, that's all goes into what feels really risky around conflict and confrontation, is all of the vulnerability that goes into it, right? So being able to view conflict as an opportunity to get to know yourself better and your partner better is such a paradigm shift, because we see conflict as something we want to avoid, when really we should welcome it, because that means we get to see our partner more deeply.
And then I think that the intimacy and the connection, if conflict is done quote unquote correctly or healthily, it can only get deeper. I liked something that you wrote in our outline, and that is that it is healthy and it is a good skill to be able to stand up for ourselves. And it was kind of an aha moment for me, because one of the reasons that I struggled with confrontation in my 20s and 30s, I do not reveal how old I am on this on this show. I like to be mysterioso.
Yeah.
I think because I was never given a chance to even speak my feelings growing up, and I was put in some really bad situations with my authority figures growing up in the church, things that were scary, things that were abusive. I had a bishop in the Mormon church. I am just unbelievably shocked to this day that people let him carry on the way he did. And I would just have to, sit there and take it. My parents, I would just have to sit there and take it. And so I never learned how to stand up for myself. And it is such a good feeling to know that you can and to know how to do it. I appreciated that you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So anytime that we can voice ourselves in a way that feels challenging, feels potentially threatening, even though it may not be a real threat, is incredibly empowering. To say the thing that we want to say the least is the thing we need to say the most. It's often because we don't want to be disappointed in the way our partner responds, to feel rejected potentially because of something that we said. So when we have that empowerment, it's like, I'm claiming this for myself. You get to participate or not.
Yes. You always, always, always put yourself first, and the rest falls into place is what I like to say. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and stay tuned because this is really the meat. When we come back, we are going to talk about how to overcome the fear of confrontation, and I'll be listening to Christina. Maybe I'll be confronting some of my friends soon. Just joking. A lot of my friends listen, and actually, something that just came to mind about this whole thing of being a little intimidated, or a lot of confronting my friends, is it has actually helped me to sift through a little bit. And I have people in my life who are just so respectful of me and mutually supportive. And I don't know, of course it could still happen, but any of my friends listening, I love you so much. On to the commercial break. And then how to overcome fear of confrontation and how to do it. I am passionate about the opportunity that a breakup gives us for a fresh start, but it can sure be hard to see that when you're heartbroken, right? I have worked with people all around the world to beat their breakups with my own 3-part process. I've created an ebook that guides readers through each step using practical advice straight from an experienced breakup coach. Click on the link at the top of the show notes and get your copy of the Broken Heart Repair Kit, the 3-step method for beating your breakup, at my special Sex and the Solo Girl release price of just $24.99. And remember, you've got this. Welcome back, everyone. Let's get into, like I said, the meat of this. We've talked about why it's important to do this, but how do you do it? Very few of us are taught how to do this. I'm guessing not too many people listening have read as many books as we have on relationships, or taken a workshop, or gone on a retreat. So let's get Christina's tips. First, how to overcome the fear. What can you tell me? What can you tell others who really don't have experience doing this and wouldn't want to?
So when it comes to the fear, right? We talked about the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment. What does this mean? So my first request for anybody who is afraid of confrontation is to do some self-discovery around, why does it feel so scary to say this thing that you want to say, or to have a contentious conversation with somebody who loves you and that you love as well? Where does that come from? Did you have a verbally abusive parent? Were things really contentious in the household growing up. Obviously, a lot of our adult triggers come from our childhood wounds. So going back as far as understanding what was confrontation like in your household growing up? What happened if you expressed something that you wanted or needed, or an emotion that other people potentially found unpleasant? Were you told to go to your room? Were you denied the ability to speak fully to that emotion or to be fully seen in that emotion? That's another really important thing with conflict as around vulnerability is, can I allow somebody to fully see me? If I say this thing and I start to break down, am I going to be uncomfortable that this person is witnessing me breaking down over something that might feel irrational in my head, but you still get to be seen fully, loved and accepted in those moments? Like, that is the most beautiful experience you can have with a partner. And it is so intimate in those ways. It's very emotionally intimate. So doing some self-discovery and learning about yourself is like, and if it's not something, if you can't necessarily put your finger on it, just recognizing the sensations in your body.
Yes, like my thing with my eyes and my forehead. I knew that about myself for a long time, and that was definitely a sign that I needed to work on this.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, where is this feeling in my body? Am I feeling it in the pit of my stomach? Am I feeling dread? How would I describe it? And when you can start to identify that, then you can actually become way more self-aware as to, okay, this is what this feeling is. This is how I want to handle it. When I get this gut feeling, that means that I now know I need to say something that might be challenging. And that's where I would recommend doing what I have, which is a part of the conflict resolution and repair kit, is how to initiate difficult conversations. And it goes through a series of questions to ask yourself, so that way you can get extremely clear and be very confident in what you're saying. Sometimes people are afraid to bring a topic up because of how the person responds. And am I going to get overwhelmed? Am I not going to know how to respond to how my partner is responding? So if my partner gets defensive, do I not have the tools I need to respond to somebody who's defensive and help de-escalate that situation and bring them back to the topic that we're talking about in a way that doesn't feel threatening to them or me?
I mean, perhaps if you have a history of this in your relationship and your partner has a history of not handling it well, I guess over time you would really kind of get, I don't know, whittled down and not want to.
Yeah, it's very discouraging.
Take this on. And again, these could be, red flags. These could be things to look at when you're thinking of whether or not to move forward with someone.
Exactly.
One of my tips for overcoming fear is practice. And one way that I have practiced is writing it down. And this is something that I have done for years. And that could look like perhaps listing things that I might be upset about, or writing a letter is something that I have done a lot to my for my partners. And typically it's not like I sit down and read the letter, though I have before. And that can actually kind of be a beautiful experience to really show your partner what was coming out of you when you were going from your gut and writing down what came for you. I mean, as long as you do it constructively.
Exactly.
But for years, I have written letters before I knew that I was going to have a tricky conversation. And I have to say, that really, really helps.
It does.
It helps you to think about it. It helps you to calm down before you have the conversation. And especially if you feel unpracticed or if this is intimidating to you, it can get really clear to know what you're going to bring up before you're in the heat of the moment and feeling all these body sensations and feeling confronted and uneasy. So I do say writing things down is a tip that I would give.
Absolutely. Writing things down can get a lot of clarity and also start to soothe that emotional escalation you might be feeling and then allows our rational part of our brain to come online. Logic and emotion are two sides of the same coin, and they both need to coexist whenever we are expressing what's going on. We have to understand our emotions. We have to understand why they came up. And being able to express it in a way that can be received is really important versus like, I'm afraid to bring this up, so I'm just going to like word vomit everything and then overwhelm and confuse my partner. When writing it, you get really clear on it. And I think that's the most important thing is clarity. When you're preparing for initiating a difficult or uncomfortable conversation, first understand what are the feelings that you're experiencing when you even think about bringing this conversation up. Are you feeling nervous? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling scared? Then understand, why am I feeling these right now? Like, why is it coming up for me? Well, maybe I'm anxious because I'm worried about how they're going to respond, that they're going to respond poorly. Or maybe I'm anxious because I'm going to upset the other person and I don't want to upset the other person or hurt their feelings. So then after you kind of get a little bit more, I guess, emotionally regulated around that, understand what is the outcome you want from bringing this conversation up. What are you seeking by bringing this up? Are you seeking change? Are you trying to make a request? Are you seeking just to be seen and understood that this thing happened and you don't want it to happen again? Was a boundary crossed? Like, what is the outcome that you need by initiating this conversation? Because that will help you be way more focused in the conversation. The conversation will less likely start to derail because, again, you have the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And then understanding what is best case scenario and what's worst case scenario if you bring up this conversation.
And when it comes to what you're trying to get out of it, I actually think letting your partner know that before you start might be a beautiful thing.
And then last but not least, after you go through the best case and worst case scenario, and what is your plan on handling it? Like, can I get through the worst case scenario? That should help ease any type of anxiety or fear that's coming up for you. But the last thing is, when is a good time to actually invite my partner to the conversation? Being really considerate of your partner's headspace and making sure that it is when they're relaxed. So avoid moments where it's maybe right before they're walking out the door to go to work, or right before bed when they're relaxing, or when they're very distracted with something or potentially in a challenging mood. People may consider this to be walking on eggshells. I consider this to be being really considerate, right? Be considerate of where your partner is. And a conversation doesn't need to necessarily always be handled in that moment. If you need a couple of days to collect yourself around it and then actually put a plan in place, then you're setting yourself up for success. So that would be the whole preparation part, but you haven't initiated the conversation yet. But before we move on to actually initiating the conversation, did you have any questions about those?
What can you tell us about story versus facts when you are preparing or when you're overcoming fear of confrontation? What is the difference and how can you separate the two?
Yeah, that's a part of the emotional regulation journey sheet that I provide in the conflict resolution and repair kit. And it's really it's understanding what is the narrative I'm telling myself versus what actually happened. So for example, as you are processing the emotions around, let's say your partner forgot to pick something up from the grocery store again, and this is the 10th time this week, and now you feel like he or she doesn't care about you or doesn't prioritize you, right? So these are the stories that we're telling ourselves in these moments when we were feeling wronged, that sparked some negative or challenging emotion. So the fact is, my partner forgot to pick something up from the grocery store. What other facts do I know about this situation? Well, I don't really know any other facts. When that one specific act starts to then spiral into, they don't care about me, they never prioritize me, I would always remember to pick it up from the grocery store. So then we start to do comparing. This is how people start to build their argument. So that way, when they do approach the conversation, they feel justified. They feel like they have ammo ready, right? So we start to weaponize this story that we're telling ourselves when none of it is actually true. Or at least check that it's true. Ask your partner, when you forget to do things, does that mean you don't care about me? Obviously, nobody's going to say, no, of course not, right? Your partner does care about you. but sometimes they forget. Maybe they have ADHD. There are a lot of other contributing factors that could go into it. So recognize the facts versus the narrative we're telling ourselves. Sometimes people have a hard time disassociating the two from each other because in our mind, we often project onto others what we would do in that situation. And that is not fair because we handle things very differently than our partner. We think differently than our partner. We feel differently from our partner. So stop comparing yourself to your partner is what I would say. And then learn just checking the facts. He forgot something for the 10th time this week.
And I'd asked you to get it. That would be a fact rather than saying you completely ignored me. You didn't care what I was saying. That would be part of the discussion is,
yes,
we had talked about doing this.
Yes.
And then you didn't.
So the fact is you didn't do the thing you said you were going to do. And under every complaint, there's actually an unmet need that can turn into a positive request. So for the complaint of, you ignore me because you don't ever remember to do the thing that you said you're going to do for me. It's, hey, I would really appreciate it if when you say you're going to do something, that you actually do it. And if you feel like you cannot, that you at least communicate that with me ahead of time. So turning complaints into actionable positive requests is a huge step in the right direction of communication, which also helps avoid conflict.
Love it. This is so great. And you are so wise. So we've talked about how to overcome the fear of confrontation and also how to prep for it. And this is something to prep for because it's so important. Yeah. So once you get to the point and you're ready, how do you initiate this?
Yeah. Begin by inviting your partner to the conversation. So many times we just will blurt something out and be like, I need to talk to you, or I can't believe you did that, or passive aggressive comments, hoping that our partner will then bring it up. Instead, just make a request. I would like to have a conversation about something that's on my mind. Is now a good time for you? Conversations require consent.
Oh, that is such a good point. Can you say just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Think about if you're in the middle of something, or let's say you're like in a really good mood and you are in the zone and you're in your workflow, or you're just like doing something that feels really good to you. And then your partner comes out of nowhere and it's just like, you fucking forgot to empty the dishwasher again. And it's like, what? It just completely disrupts your flow. And you're just like, you feel like somebody just sucker punched you, but verbally. And you're like, I wasn't prepared for that. I'm not mentally prepared to be present for you in this moment to address it. So it's also really unfair to you as the person who's bringing something up that was bothering you to like surprise attack your partner in something that's bothering you, because you're not giving them an opportunity to be in the headspace to support you. So always start with an invitation. If they say yes, I'm in the headspace to do it, or like, yes, now's a great time, then, we'll move on to step 2. But if they say no, let them know that you understand, like now's not a good time, but ask them when a good time would be. Get a committed time frame, because whatever you have to say is important, and do not let them avoid from having the conversation, because that's how resentment builds up over time, which then leads to much bigger issues. So always make sure that you can address the issue. And if now's not a good time, that you have a scheduled time to do it.
Yes.
And if they say yes, then moving on to step 2 would be let them know how you're feeling. So in the preparation, we talked about how are you feeling about this? Express to them why you feel this way. Like, I'm feeling nervous to bring this up because I'm afraid of how you're going to respond. And that makes me feel X. Maybe it makes me feel unsafe, or it makes me feel like I can't actually tell you what's going on, whatever it is. Being able to express that really vulnerable one allows them to be like, oh, let me check in on myself and make sure that like I am going to be able to hold space for this person. And it also helps them soften a little bit, right? It's like, I want to make sure my partner does feel safe in these conversations. So let me just like, if I already feel my defenses coming up because this person said the "we need to talk" words, which instantly start to like turn everybody's hackles up.
Yeah. Thank you, pop culture.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then get their buy-in for how you want the conversation to go. So express, like, I want this to be an easy conversation. This is what my goal is. My goal is that you hear what I have to say and that we have this result. Is that something that you can get on board with? So getting buy-in from your partner to an actual mutually agreed upon goal. And then once once you guys both come to that conclusion, that's when you can express what you want to bring up. Include the outcome that you're looking for, talk about the benefits of the outcome. Like if, for example, maybe you were worried about bringing up, I want to go to couples counseling because you're afraid they're going to be like, no, absolutely not.
No.
Talk about the benefits that could come up from it. Like I think it would be really helpful for us to have an unbiased perspective if we go to couples counseling, which I feel like will help us understand each other more. Right. So it's really about meeting in the middle. What are the benefits? Not me versus you. How can we be allies versus enemies? Right. So that's how I would initiate the conversation, is talk about how you're feeling about it, get their buy-in, talk about the outcome that you want, and then talk about the benefits of the thing that you're asking for.
Do you have any tips if your partner becomes really defensive?
Yeah, absolutely. My personal experience is expressing like this, how it's making you feel, saying something along the lines of like, I'm feeling uncomfortable right now based off of your approach to this conversation. If now's not a good time, then maybe we should table this conversation and save it for a different time where I feel like you're actually going to be able to hear me, because right now it feels like you're being defensive, or I'm feeling like I'm being attacked by the response that you just gave. So like maybe we need to table this, and just checking in with your partner. And like sometimes it's helpful to have that reminder for them, because we were never taught how to fight. Oftentimes how we fight is based off of what was modeled for us, as you said earlier. So sometimes people don't realize that their ingrained communication behaviors and patterns are harmful. Being able to bring it up and bring it to their attention can help them become more aware and help redirect their approach, right? So if it's like, I'm trying not to be more defensive, but if I am being defensive and I can't recognize it, then it helps for my partner to be like, you're being defensive right now, or I feel like you're being defensive right now. And then I can be like, okay, let me check myself and just readjust a couple of things.
Yeah, self-reflection is sometimes really necessary in this process.
My last relationship, I did not realize how passive aggressive I was. I had no idea how passive aggressive I was. And then he would get so frustrated and just like storm off and huff and puff. And I'm just like, I can't believe you're acting this way. And he'd be like, well, the comment you made was, X, Y, and Z. And I was like, oh, I didn't even realize it. Because that, for the longest time, was how I got my needs met. But I didn't know until he brought it to my attention. And then in those moments, and I asked him, I was like, I need you to have grace with me, because I'm not aware of when I'm being passive aggressive or snarky. I would like for you to tell me. And so then we actually discussed on a way that he could say it where I would actually be able to receive it. So anytime I was passive aggressive or snarky, he would say snark attack. Like instead of shark attack. But it was funny for us. It was playful for us.
But you had an agreement also.
Yeah, we had. Okay, yes, wonderful. It was a mutually agreed upon, way to bring it up to me, to bring it to my attention. So that way I knew, okay, let me try that again. And I think that's another really important thing when you ask, like, what do you do when your partner is being defensive, is like, that didn't feel good. Are you willing to try that again? Are you willing to say that, to try saying that in a different way, and giving them another opportunity to try again?
I really like what you said about agreements. I think if you have an ongoing conflict, it can be really lovely, I think, to come together and say, how can we prevent this in the future? Another one of my guest co-hosts, Brian Dunn, we were talking in an episode late last year about the fact that his partner does have ADD and often fails to clean up and do the dishes. And this is something that they've worked through. And I think he said that when it comes up, they've agreed, that he says something like time for ice cream or something very cute and unthreatening.
Yeah.
And it was something that they agreed. So that
I love that.
Long term, they didn't continue to have a conflict. And
Yes.
I thought that was wonderful. Just like your snark attack.
Yeah, it's like start, and then it became less and less and less over time because I was bringing my awareness back to it consistently. So I'm like, oh, and then I was able to actually catch it before I was being passive aggressive, and then I was like, okay, if I'm being passive aggressive, there's a request that I could make instead, and then I started changing it to requests that it could actually be made.
That's great. And this leads into what we want to talk about last, and that is not just having the confrontation and being proud of yourself for doing it and proud of your partner for seeing it through. How can you then turn it into, like we said earlier, a deeper intimacy and a deeper connection, and have it add to your relationship and the long-term ability of it?
Yeah. Well, my question for anybody listening is, have you ever had a fight with a partner and then left it feeling better, feeling relieved, feeling more seen, feeling more connected, feeling like you're stronger than ever? That's because when you fight right, or when you have productive conflict in your relationship, that means that you're actually attempting to see each other better, work together. And that is what actually creates the strengthening of the connection. Being able to know that, like, I can say something that is going to be hard for you to hear and hard for me to say, and you're going to be able to receive it and still love me and still want to be with me. That is just like, it's such a good feeling to have that level of vulnerability with a partner and being like, I'm embarrassed to say this, or this is the last thing I want to say right now, but I know I need to say it. Can you be in a space to receive it? And that can really help somebody feel safe in the relationship. And when we feel safe and secure in our relationship, that's like ultimately what we're asking for in all of our relationships is, are you there for me? Right? We want to feel safe and secure in our relationships, and knowing that somebody can be there for you in the times that you may feel shame or discomfort is one of the most reaffirming things that you can experience. There was a saying, you grow from your bad experiences or your uncomfortable experiences, not the good experiences. So like if everything's going right, there's not really any growth happening. But when things go wrong, we have to pivot, adjust, learn new skills, whatever it is that helps us grow and become a better person. And then this provides you the opportunity to grow together as a couple when you can get through confrontation in a productive way where you both are understanding and seeing each other to the fullest extent.
And that's really what you want, is to feel safe and feel seen. I also think that trust is something that you choose to give to someone, and you choose to give more of to someone. And this would be something that would definitely compel you, yes, to give more trust to your partner.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'll never forget with one of my exes in couples counseling, he made a comment of like, she doesn't trust me. And then our therapist was like, is that true? Do you not trust him? And I was like, well, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. Like, do I trust you to help pay the bills? Yeah. Do I trust you to do this? Yeah. But like, do I trust him to be there for me emotionally? No. And that's a really big deal. And there's a reason for it, why I felt I wasn't able to really emotionally let go and surrender the way I wanted to this partner and let them see all aspects of myself, because I didn't trust that they would be there or how they would respond in a way that made me feel safe. So when you can actually provide a consistent space, trust is really about consistency. So when you can consistently be there for your partner in those moments, it does build trust. But the moment you are getting defensive, you're using threats, or you're just like having that unhealthy fighting where it's like knock down, drag out, we leave feeling even more divided and more separated, questioning our relationship. Like, trust is going to erode inevitably. So conflict is an opportunity to build trust as well.
Christina, this has been a great conversation. It's been an important conversation. I really wanted to use the new platform to help people have healthy, joyous relationships, whether or not you're single or with a partner right now. This is really, really something to focus on. Can you tell everyone again where to get your workbook?
Yeah, absolutely. You can either direct message me on Facebook at Christina Morelli Coaching, or you can go to my website, ChristinaMorelliCoaching.com, and you will see a link at the top that says Conflict Resolution and Repair Kit. And that is where you can get your 20 plus resources to walk you through the pre-conflict, during conflict, and post-conflict repair stages.
How great. And what a gift that you are giving to couples. Yeah, I like the focus that you've turned in your practice. Before we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone that now that I've got the new podcast, I'd really like to hear from my listeners. Do you have a question about dating, relationships, perhaps non-monogamy, breakups that you would like me to answer in an episode? Please send it my way. My email is in the show notes. I am very active on Instagram. Regardless if you have a question or not, I would love you to come over there and say hi. Let me know if you're enjoying the new show or not. I really want to involve my listeners more moving forward. So hit me up. I've got some great guest co-hosts who come on. I find myself to be quite knowledgeable in this area. So I'd love to help you out. And with that, I will see you next time. Thank you to everyone who's continued to follow me with the new show. It really, really means a lot to me. I'm feeling really revved up about it. So I appreciate everyone who's listening today.
Thanks, Janice.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. I cannot wait for our next episode. And I guess one more thing, if there's a topic you'd like Christina and I to cover, let me know. I really like hearing about that as well.
Awesome.
So, all right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Sex and the Solo Girl with Janice Formichella, the podcast for those who want to add more flavor to their relationships with themselves and others. If you liked today's episode, make sure to head over to Instagram and let her know. See you next week.